Justice Department investigators are considering whether to pursue manslaughter and perjury charges for the explosion aboard Deepwater Horizon rig, which killed 11 workers. If pursued, the measures would finally hold a company with a history of problems responsible for its deadly negligence. Even before the BP spill, this was a company with many problems. It had been cited for 760 egregious, willful safety violations between June of '07 and February of 2010. By way of comparison, Exxon only had one over that same period. It beat Exxon 760 to 1 in safety violations. That is not a good record. But the company reached new levels of ineptitude in the days and months leading up to the explosion. BP was repeatedly warned by Halliburton, the company that it hired to seal the well with cement, that it should use 21 devices called centralizers to make sure the well was properly sealed. They opted instead to use just 6. Can you imagine? They were more irresponsible than Halliburton. Now, on top of that, they ignored clear warning signs in the hours leading up to the explosion. Investigators learned that there was, quote, a very large abnormality in a negative pressure test, which checks for leaks in the well. But workers later decided that the test was successful after all. Gee, I wonder what kind of pressure was put on to get to that result. During the testimony months later, BP called that the fundamental mistake. Although there were many mistakes, of course. Now, why to rush to get that work done and to avoid dealing with problems that would later prove to be deadly? Money, of course. BP leased a Deepwater Horizon oil rig from Transocean and was hoping to use that rig to drill another well in the Gulf. Now, BP had hoped to start a new well by March 8th, but delays had put the company behind schedule. Based on an estimate of $500,000 per day to drill on the site, the delay of 43 days had cost BP more than $21 million by the day of the explosion on April 20th. So they risked the operation and people's lives because they wanted to hurry up and make more money. And there's no clearer example of their cost cutting than the infamous blowout preventer, the one thing that was supposed to be the fail-safe in cutting the flow of oil. This last line of defense didn't work for numerous reasons. Among the problems cited, a dead battery in its control pad, a useless version of a key component, and last but not least, the failure to install a $500,000 switch in case blowout preventer failed. Well, that extra $500,000 wound up costing them $20 billion in damages. And much more importantly, 11 lives were lost because of the explosion on that Deepwater Horizon oil rig. That's real. You see those folks? I mean, I hate to tell you this, but they died. You know that. And they had families. And now they're not with us anymore because somebody didn't want to spend a little extra money. And of course, an estimated 172 million gallons also spilled into the Gulf, affecting all of us. Look, corporations demand special rights in court, and they usually get them. Cases like Citizens United give them human rights like freedom of speech. But when it comes to responsibility, then all of a sudden they don't want to be treated like human beings. They don't want to be held criminally responsible for their actions. Well, you can't have it both ways. You can't say you want all the constitutional rights of real human beings and none of the responsibilities. And who should shoulder that blame? How about the guys at the top who are making all of the money? They get all the upside, so shouldn't they be held responsible for the downside? My guess is that if we did that and they were on the line, all of a sudden we would have a lot more safety precautions because those guys don't want to go to jail. Joining me now is University of Maryland Law School professor Jane Barrett to talk about this more. Professor Barrett, what would happen if we said, hey, you know, the CEO of the company is going to go to jail if people die in this job because of criminal negligence? Do you think that that would help make the jobs a lot safer?
Well, I think if there were personal accountability of corporate management for these type of accidents, that's clearly would make people pay more attention to the laws. And I agree with you, it would stop some of the workplace disasters, we say.
And how about this specific case of BP? Do you think there's some chance that some people are going to go to jail? And if they do, who would it be?
I think that there is a possibility. Based on the reports, the government's looking at a wide range of potential actions, ranging from false statements to Congress, false statements perhaps to investors, as well as what actually happened on the rig. The Siemens manslaughter statute has provisions to hold both the people who are on the rig responsible for negligence, as well as people who are onshore or up the corporate chain. And the government can always use aiding and abetting to kind of loop in the senior executives. I will tell you, this is a long process. These are not easy cases to bring, and in my view, one of the worst things that could happen is if the government just simply settles for a large corporate fine and doesn't try to at least hold some individuals accountable.
You see, here's my problem with middle management, right? Or worse yet, the guys on the rig. They have a ton of pressure on them. Make money, we got to go. We got to open up that second rig. It's costing us a lot of money. And then if something goes wrong, then you blame them. And if they don't do it and they don't succumb to that pressure, they get fired sometimes. So it doesn't make more sense to move it up the chain so that there's a culture at the company of, oh my God, don't play with people's lives because my ass is on the line?
Well, absolutely, but the problem is under our system of laws, you've got to have the evidence. And sometimes the only way you can get the evidence is by working your way up the chain, just like you do in any other criminal case. If you're investigating a company for falsifications in terms of government contracts, you start with the lower level employees and you work your way up. That's not to say that all of those lower level employees would get charged, but they're clearly going to be part of the investigation. And in my view, you need to get this investigation up to management that are off the rig who are making some of the decisions if it's going to have a deterrent effect.
All right, Professor Jane Barrett, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
We really appreciate it. And look, I want to tell the audience one more thing here. Look, again, I can't emphasize enough. Those 11 guys died. It wasn't a simple mistake. It wasn't an act of God. It was people saying, I want to save a nickel and a dime, and if people wind up dying, okay, so be it. There's something wrong with that, and I think the government should take criminal action on that. All right, now next.